Thank you, Rita. Good evening and welcome to Look North. Our top story tonight. Claims that poor housing is damaging people's health. This rental home in one part of Leeds is typical of many properties that families are living in.
Unfortunately, it's really common in this area to have houses that are full of damp, full of mould, with pests. All of these are Category 1 issues.
We'll hear what the political parties have to say on the subject of housing. Also tonight, has the Northern Powerhouse delivered for Yorkshire?
And I'll be in Harrogate with some very special events and some very special guests here in the Spiegel Tent.
It's been a breezy and a cloudy day, a lot of cloud persisting into the weekend, but will it stay dry? I'll be back later in the programme with a full forecast.
Hello and thank you for joining us this Friday evening. With less than a week to go until the general election, we're returning to one of the issues that keep coming up: poor quality housing. Over the last few years, we've brought you numerous stories of people living in awful conditions. It's an issue that you've been telling us is a priority for when you're deciding who to vote for on the 4th of July. Now, a group that supports families in Leeds says poor housing conditions are damaging people's health. Figures suggest tenants in Yorkshire and the Humber face the worst rates of damp and mould in the country. West Yorkshire's political reporter Gemma Dillon has been speaking to one woman who says her damp, mouldy house is attracting rats and it's no place to bring up her 3 children. We've changed her name to protect her identity.
My house is damp, my kitchen has damp, the living room has damp, the bedroom has damp, the children's room has damp. Everything is damp.
Sarah has rented this terraced house in Leeds for 8 years with her 3 children. The property has damp, mould, cockroaches and rats, and she said her landlord won't do anything to help her. The problems are affecting her health.
I have asthma and I went to the doctor and have an inhaler. 3 times I have had chest infections.
And how does that make you feel?
The house I live in I am not happy with and it's not safe. I would like my house changed.
Sarah's story is not an isolated one. Branthi Naik works with families facing similar issues in Leeds.
Unfortunately, it's really common in this area to have houses that are full of damp, full of mould, with pests. All of these are Category 1 issues, which really mean that the house doesn't meet the decent housing standards that every house should do.
Nationally, the People's Health Trust say their analysis shows private renters in Yorkshire and the Humber have the worst housing conditions in England, with almost 40% of homes failing to meet the decent home standard. That's almost double the latest national figure of 21% in England. They want whoever forms the next government to take action.
Section 21s are something that we're calling on alongside a number of other organisations to bring back into the Renters Reform Bill, so that means that people like Sarah can complain openly about their tenancy and their conditions without fear of retribution, which is what's currently going on. We also want to see that the decent home standard is extended to the private rented sector, because currently they fall outside of that, and that's why a huge amount of this problem exists.
It's a pressing problem for the incoming government and one that may take many years to fix. But for thousands of families just like Sarah's, they just want somewhere safe to live. Gemma Dillon, BBC Look North, Leeds.
Well, housing is one of the many issues up for debate during the election. Gemma can run us through what the main parties have to say on that subject.
It is something all of the major parties are talking about this election. Labour say they would immediately abolish Section 21. That's those no-fault evictions. They'd also take steps to prevent private renters from being discriminated against and take steps to decisively raise standards in rented homes. The Conservatives would introduce their renters' reform bills, and they say they'd take the steps needed to deliver court reforms so that they can fully abolish Section 21. The Liberal Democrats, they too are talking about abolishing no-fault evictions. They also talk about extending the length of tenancies and making sure rent only rises by a fair amount each year. The Green Party want to introduce rent control so local authorities can control rents if the rental market is unaffordable for many people living in a certain area. They too are talking about getting rid of no-fault evictions. The Yorkshire Party again are talking about ending no-fault evictions, other than in carefully controlled circumstances, and even then only with 6 months' notice. They'd also introduce what they're calling a good landlord scheme that local authorities would run. And finally, Reform UK, they would abolish the Renters' Reform Bill. They say the existing legislation is inadequate to address the bad practices. Instead, they would boost the monitoring, appeals and enforcement process for renters with grievances.
Well, there's certainly much work to do, isn't there? Thank you, Gemma. Well, we've just been hearing how the private rented housing in our region is the worst in England. And yet for years we've been hearing the phrases levelling up and Northern Powerhouse to reassure us that the gap between the north and south will close. But how much of all that promised cash have we actually seen? Well, David Rhodes has been looking at the figures for us tonight. David, it's all yours.
6 days until polling day, Amanda, but we are going back in time because it is the question that no Prime Minister in the last 50 years has found an answer for. How do we close the gap between the north and the south? People in the south are richer, they do better at school, and they also live longer. And historically, the government has also spent more money on people in London than here in Yorkshire. To close that gap, this Prime Minister in 2014 had the idea of the Northern Powerhouse. And as James Vincent explains, it is one attempt at closing that regional divide.
Today I want to focus on the north of England. The powerhouse of London dominates more and more. We need the northern powerhouse too.
Northern Powerhouse.
Northern Powerhouse.
The Northern Powerhouse part.
Northern Powerhouse.
The Northern Economic Powerhouse.
To create what he's calling a Northern Powerhouse.
But the Northern Powerhouse.
10 years ago, everybody started saying Northern Powerhouse. It was a policy to even out our inequalities. The 2 high-speed rail lines promised didn't happen, but one of the big changes to come from it was elected mayors.
I think it'd be fair to say that central support for many of the major projects, whether it be rail or investment innovation, has been variable at best. But one of the things that did start in that period and has continued unabated is the devolution of power to our metro mayors.
We want to unite and level up across the country. That's our mission. We're incredibly ambitious for what we want to do for the country.
Levelling up.
Levelling up.
Levelling up. Levelling up.
Levelling up.
Well, certainly we've heard the levelling up phrase perhaps thousands of times since the 2019 election.
The government points to individual pots of money allocated to individual communities, but only 10% of that money has been spent so far.
But I think there's been very little policy to come in behind that to try and back that up. The devolution element has been really good. But look at a number of the other things that have been put in place. They've been small, they've been piecemeal, and I don't think they've been big enough.
House was David Cameron's idea. Levelling up was the central idea, though, of this Prime Minister. The money for levelling up, James referred to, has totalled this amount, £1.6 billion in grant funding for the region since 2019. Now that money has been earmarked to regenerate town centres like Barnsley, Catterick, and this is what Wakefield will supposedly look like in 2024, hopefully. Other projects include a grant for the redevelopment of a sports community centre in Doncaster, and more than £200,000 was spent on buying this pub in Wensleydale and ensuring it was a centre for the local community. Labour says levelling up funding, though, is just masking huge cuts made by the Conservatives to the money that used to go to local councils, whilst the Tories say a Labour government would cancel many of the projects already allocated funding. But, as Spencer Stokes now explains, some of those projects have been promised cash, but it has yet to arrive.
Rural railway that winds its way from Huddersfield south to Penistone and then on to Barnsley and Sheffield. It takes an hour and 15 minutes to complete the 38-mile journey. Plenty of time to soak up the views of the Pennine landscape. Miss the train though, and you'll have to wait an hour for the next one. Kirklees Council want to increase the number of trains that run, and last November the government agreed to provide £48 million of levelling up funds to help achieve that. Something the former Dewsbury MP and now Ossett and Denby Dale Conservative candidate has been talking about.
I've also delivered £48 million of levelling up funds for the Penistone line. So I think people want to go for a local choice.
But the money actually remains in Whitehall and hasn't been delivered to the north, to the disappointment of those who spent years working on the £48 million levelling up bid.
Yes, it feels very frustrating. I mean, we were told before Christmas that the money had been allocated through the Levelling Up Fund. We were told a month or so ago that the plan or the proposal is with the Department of Transport for validation, and in fact the money is also still with the Department of Transport. I think our concern is then that we were told the money has to be spent by 2026. The chances of actually spending the money, even if it still comes down by that date, are going to be slim. So we could end up, losing it or losing some of it.
This is a debate about what delivered means. Has the cash been transferred to the project or just allocated for that scheme?
I think the difficulty is that an MP announcing something isn't the same as that something actually being delivered.
The Penistone line was one of 6 projects awarded levelling up funding last November. £20 million for manufacturing in Keighley, £18 million for Doncaster North, £17 million for Huddersfield Market, £16 million for Holbeck in Leeds, and £15 million for Wakefield. Money still held in Whitehall. The Levelling Up departments say they're working closely with local authorities to ensure projects are still viable. Until this process is complete, all funding is provisional. The question now, what would a future Labour government do?
It would be irresponsible for me to sit here and promise individual pledges that have been made by the Tories that aren't based on a good rail transport strategy.
That sounds like the funding might not come under a future Labour government.
Look, we need to be straight with people. We're not going to make commitments if we can't say how much the cost will definitely be to the taxpayer and how long it will take to deliver those things, and indeed whether it's feasible to deliver them.
Meanwhile, Penistone line trains trundle on, awaiting the funding that could deliver a more frequent service. Spencer Stokes, BBC Look North, Penistone.
So, after the Northern Powerhouse and levelling up, has it made any difference? Well, not when it comes to where the government spends our money. The latest Treasury figures show over £14,000 is spent per person in London each year, the most of any region in England. That covers all government spending, hospitals, schools, transport, everything. In our region, the government spends £11,800 per person, and the gap is widening. Public spending in the capital has increased by 17% since the last election. Spending in our region, an increase of 14%. As we know, promises have been made by Prime Ministers in the past to close the gap between the North and the South. And whoever is Prime Minister, this time next week, we will be closely scrutinising the promises they make for our region. Amanda.
Thank you very much, David, and I'm sure nobody could tell that we're working with some new technology tonight. Now you're watching Friday's Look North, still to come on tonight's programme. We'll hear from the 18-year-olds who cycled over 3,000 miles from Istanbul to Huddersfield to raise money for charity. In other news, Leeds Rhinos and the Burrow family have confirmed plans for the funeral of Rugby League star Rob Burrow following his recent death from motor neurone disease aged just 41. On Sunday the 7th of July, the service at Pontefract Crematorium will be for invited guests only. However, members of the public are welcome to stand on the roadside to pay their respects as the funeral cortege passes. The route will pass the Escape Leisure Complex, Pontefract Racecourse and travel through Acton and Featherstone. A nurse who killed a cyclist in Sheffield in a few seconds of bad driving has been handed a suspended jail sentence. Adrian Lane died when he hit a car which was turning as he travelled down Ringinglow Road in September 2022. The court heard how the car's driver, Gillian Dungworth from Rotherham, turned across Mr Lane's path, causing him to somersault into the vehicle's windscreen. She was given a 2-year prison sentence, suspended for 2 years after pleading guilty to dangerous driving. 2 men have been arrested after an armed robbery at the White Rose shopping centre in Leeds. It happened at the Tag boutique on Wednesday night. A number of watches were stolen and glass cabinets were smashed. The men, aged 32 and 40, remain in custody while investigations continue. Police are appealing for anyone with information to call 101. Now, most 18-year-olds holiday with their friends in Magaluf or Ibiza. There can't be too many who decide to cycle 3,000 miles across Europe for charity instead. But that's exactly what Leo Bretherton and Joe Brown did. They cycled all the way from Istanbul to West Yorkshire, and all to raise money for cancer research. They arrived back home in Skelmanthorpe near Huddersfield on Wednesday night, and earlier I asked them how they were feeling.
Legs are a little bit sore, but yeah, I feel happy that we're finally home.
It was only Wednesday, wasn't it, that you got back, Joe? Have you managed to relax for the last few days?
Well, actually, I went for a run yesterday because I don't know. It was. I felt more tired when we were actually doing it than when I got back. So I got to catch up on some sleep though, because I fell asleep on the bus over here.
I can't blame you. You actually came in on the bus today, didn't you? You didn't cycle.
No.
So back to the route, the exotic route of Istanbul. Just tell us a little bit about where you went and the places that you saw.
Yeah, we went through 15 countries. Started in Istanbul and went through Turkey and then Greece and then Bulgaria and then back into Greece. Then North Macedonia, Albania. Then we got the ferry from Albania to Italy. Then through Austria, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium, France, and then England.
Wow, that is quite impressive. And this was all about raising money for charity, wasn't it? Just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for Cancer Research UK, because I think it benefits everyone in the world, cancer research, even though it's in the UK.
Absolutely, making a difference. And Joe, your brother's not been very well, has he? And he was the inspiration, wasn't he?
Yeah, it really helps when you do stuff like this to have something when it gets hard in the back of your mind to keep you going, and I think people underestimate how much that actually means to people.
It's a fantastic achievement. Just tell me a little bit about the accommodation side of things. I mean, you weren't staying in hotels, were you?
No, we were camping most nights in like very random places. We camped at a petrol station once, and on a football pitch, and just in loads of bushes and random places.
Well, you'll have some amazing stories to tell as you go forward. Thank you for coming and sharing your story with us today. And I hope the buses run and you get home on time tonight.
Hopefully.
Yes, I hope they made it home. Now, a Country File special, a BBC Bite-Sized Schools tour and a poetry festival are all coming to Bradford as part of the UK City of Culture 2025. Bradford was chosen 2 years ago, to much of the delight, as you can see there. Today, the BBC has been announced as the official broadcast partner. An event is taking place in Bradford today, setting out more of the plans for the special year. A 125-year-old theatre in Doncaster is set to go up for auction. The Grade 2 listed Grand Theatre has closed for over 30 years and has been named as at risk by the theatre's trust since 2006. The auction will happen later this month and there will be no minimum guide price. Tempting. Now, hundreds of staff and students at the University of Sheffield joined forces for a fundraising walk through the Peak District today. The Big Walk event saw over 450 people walking a total of 10,000 miles. The money raised will go directly back to the university's research into motor neurone disease. Now, a bald dog who's been taken in by the RSPCA in West Yorkshire is struggling to find a new home. Just take a look. This is Pat. She has a severe reaction to dust mites and pollen. His previous owners gave him up because of the cost of treatment, and Patch now takes allergy tablets, has medicated baths, wears sun cream and wears special jumpers in the cold weather. Isn't he gorgeous? I hope he finds a new home soon. Now, a rather magical tent has appeared in the centre of Harrogate, and today marks the start of just over a week of special events taking place inside. It's part of the Harrogate Music Festival, which will feature music, cabaret, burlesque and lots more. There's a rather fabulous guest preparing to launch the event this evening, and Beth Parsons is there for us now. Beth.
Welcome to the Spiegel Tent. I didn't even know that was a word until today, and trust me, I'm enjoying saying it. We'll find out what exactly a Spiegel Tent is very shortly. Come inside though, what you do need to know, for the next 10 days, this beautiful tent in Harrogate will be full of jazz, funk, dance, and the quietest of all the musics, silent discos as well. Launching the event tonight, over the border from West Yorkshire, we have the brilliant, the wonderful Davina De Campo. Hello, thank you very much for doing this. You look fabulous.
Well, I just rolled out of bed, you know.
What are you going to be doing for your audience tonight? Give us a little bit of a teaser.
It's going to be a nice little mixture of musical theatre, some operetta, some pop tunes and maybe a bit of silliness as well.
Do you think the people of Harrogate are ready for this?
I'm not entirely sure.
We're going to find out. Davina, good luck, break a leg.
Thank you.
And on we go over here, we're popping over, and I don't say that lightly, because this is Pop-Tart. You are Davina's support act today. Yes. How would you sum up your act?
So my act is very arty, tarty, ready to party. Going to be lots of camp tunes. I'm performing my own single Party Monster as well. So yeah, going to be performing for the icon Davina De Campo, and I'm really excited.
You look beautiful.
Thank you.
Good luck. Well done. Now, behind this brilliant idea, the brains of the mission, Sharon, could you please put me out of my misery? What is a Spiegel Tent?
Well, this beautiful Spiegel Tent used to be a travelling hall, a bit of a dance hall across Europe. And Spiegel means mirror or reflection. And the whole idea was in the mirrors all the way around, you could wink at somebody you quite like the look of rather than looking at them directly.
Will you be winking at anyone tonight, Sharon?
Well, the night is yet young.
It is. Now, obviously, your favourite evening in the programme is this evening with the brilliant Davina and Pop-Tart. But if you couldn't, what are your highlights? What one thing should we not miss?
I think the great thing about this space is that it is a sticky floor jazz club for Harrogate, so it really allows us to do lots of exciting things. We've got Gypsy Queens, House of Burlesque and a children's festival, but I'm really looking forward to the Guilders Quartet later this week.
Yeah. 10 days of pure fun inside this Spiegel Tent. We're on Crescent Gardens in Harrogate, so really in the town centre. Sharon, thank you very much. Now, there is one more person that I would like to introduce you to. And in an unusual style here on Look North, I'm not going to finish this report. I'm going to hand over to the official pianist. This is Rick. You are Davina's pianist. Could you please play us out?
Back to you in the studio.
A little bit more then. Love Davina, wonderful to see her, and the makeup on those ladies is absolutely fantastic, isn't it, Keely?
Similar to yours tonight, actually.
Oh, thanks, right back at you.
The weather. Yes, onto the weather. It's been cloudy and a windy day. I spoke to the Aero Club this afternoon, and they said even though it was a bit windy, they did manage to get up in the planes throughout the day. So it actually has been quite a good day for flying, and actually, as you can see in our second picture, it didn't stop this paraglider. Paraglider? That's paraglider, isn't it? Yeah, the paraglider earlier. So yeah, it has been a windy day. We'll lose that element of the weather over the weekend, but we are going to keep a lot of the cloud. Keep your pictures coming in to the Weather Watchers page. We're also on social media, on X, or Keely Donovan, Instagram, Keely.Donovan. So yeah, the breeze is going to ease down into the weekend, but there will be a lot of cloud around. So tomorrow, rather cloudy. That cloud could be thick enough in places to produce a little bit of light rain and drizzle, more nuisance value than anything else, and I think it'll affect the west and over the hills more than areas further east, but it certainly won't be a washout. So that's Saturday. Into Sunday, we start off on a bright note, but I think it will cloud over once again. The odd shower, but largely dry. This band of rain on Monday will bring outbreaks of rain, this cold front on Monday. And temperatures next week will be about or a little below average, and we'll keep that mobile, more changeable setup as we head through next week as well. We've had quite a lot of clouds today, but it's actually quite bright out there at the moment. So some sunshine to end the day and take us into this evening. A fine evening, and then the first half of the night does look dry with clear spells. But through the second half of the night, we start to see this cloud moving in from the west, with it 1 or 2 spots of rain, and temperatures falling back to around 10 or 11 degrees. Let's have a quick look at those high water times. In Filey at 10:41 and 10:31 in Scarborough. So some early brightness in the east, but quite quickly that cloud will move in. With it, particularly through the morning, there'll be some pockets of light rain and drizzle moving in from the west, mainly affecting western areas, but some reaching further east. I think generally, though, there will also be a good deal of dry weather, if not a little grey in places through the day. Not as breezy as today, and temperatures up at around ranging from 17 to around 18 or 19 degrees. And tomorrow evening looks much the same. There will be quite a bit of cloud in the forecast, perhaps just starting to see a little bit of brightness edging into parts of North Yorkshire later. And that will set us up for a fine night overnight into Sunday. On Sunday, it looks like we'll start the day perhaps with some sunshine, but once again, cloud amounts will increase and any sunshine will become fairly limited. In the northeast particular, there may be the odd shower on Sunday, generally dry though, and then a cold front bringing outbreaks of rain and cooler conditions for Monday.
Thank you very much. How did you say it's going to be tomorrow morning in Leeds? I'm off to a football tournament, my first one.
Cloudy, possibly a little bit drizzly. Wonderful. Are you playing?
I am not playing, no, I am definitely not playing. I shall be watching. Thank you very much, Keely. That's it from us. Have a lovely weekend, whatever the weather. Goodbye.